Welcome to today's lecture on LIFO and FIFO, or LIFO and FIFO. I've heard it pronounced both ways. So what are these things? LIFO and FIFO, that's the way I prefer to say it. Reminds me of two little dogs whenever I think of it. If I had the ability to name our dogs, I think that'd be kind of cool to have one name, LIFO and FIFO. So I'll be using those terms today. But what does this have to do with? Well, it has to do with right here, what you see here. It has to do with your inventory and how you assign costs to the items that you have in inventory and how you pull them off the shelf, at least in a theoretical respect. So say, for example, LIFO, which stands for last in, first out. Again, think of a storehouse, a room, and you're getting shipments of tongue depressors on a regular basis. And you need to go get some tongue depressors to go to the ED department. And when you go there, you grab the last ones that you just received. I'll call them the freshest ones. So you'll grab the freshest tongue depressors first, and you'll bring those over to the ED, the emergency department. If you were using FIFO, you're going to be taking the first in, first out. The ones that you received first will be the first ones that you're going to grab off the shelf. So you're going to grab the old tongue depressors and bring those to the emergency department. So think of it that way, as kind of like what you're pulling off the shelf and then the cost that we assign to that. Think about, again, we'll pick on tongue depressors. The price on those may change over time, and I think in general we do see prices increase over time. So where this impacts you as a manager is determining really your cost of goods sold. How much did you make on a particular item? Let's say it's that emergency room visit. Now, if you were taking tongue depressors, and that's going to be part of the overall expense with that particular interaction with a patient, what cost do you assign to that tongue depressor? Do you assign the cost when you bought it as with the first in, first out, the old price, or do you assign the cost of the last batch of tongue depressors that you just bought? That would be the last in, first out. And in general, I think most of us experience in our lives, and with the products that we buy, prices do tend to increase over time. So you can see how this can have an impact. You really have kind of a zone, a fuzzy zone on which cost do you apply to this particular interaction to come up with your total profit, if you will, on a particular, let's say, patient care situation or an ED visit or cardiothoracic surgery. How do you do that? So this is really a type of accounting method that you decide to choose as an organization. Why do organizations do this in the first place? Why can't they just know how much their inventory costs on the items, whatever you grab off the shelf? The reality is, those of you that work in healthcare or really in any industry, it is very difficult to assign a particular cost to a particular item. When I'm going in and I'm grabbing some power injector tubing, I really don't know which one I'm grabbing. Is it the old one? Is it the new one? I don't know. And then to track that, it can be very, very complicated and cause an undue burden to the organization. For the tracking of that cost. So you can simply kind of alleviate that by deciding to choose one of these methods to assign cost to your inventory. Here's an interesting little tidbit, that in most of the rest of the world, they do not allow you to pick which method. Now, an organization can choose. It's very interesting if you ever want to get into financial statements. The financial statements will tell you how they have chosen to assign cost to their inventory. LIFO, FIFO, and we won't get into it for this lecture, but there's actually a blend of the two, which in reality most companies use. But you have to declare which one of these methods that you are using within the United States, for companies within the United States. Companies outside of the United States, the other accounting systems, kind of the worldwide accounting system, says, you have to use first in, first out. For us, I think that's more intuitive. You want to drink the milk on the shelf before it goes bad. You want to grab the one that inventory that came in first. You want to pull that off the shelf first, and you want to assign that particular cost. So the rest of the world follows FIFO. But in this great country, we are allowed to pick both, again, up to the discretion of the organization and how it's done. I think the best way to look at how whether you decide to do LIFO or FIFO affects your overall gross profit, cost of sales, is to work through a couple of problems and look at the solutions that we get under both LIFO and FIFO. So let's get started with that. I'm going to begin with the dreaded grid. And let's start off with, let's do FIFO. Let's do that one first. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do FIFO. Okay, we're going to do the FIFO. First in, first out. So let's say, for example, we're going to have sales. And let's say we have 800, we'll just make it up, 800 units of something. I don't know what it could be, but it could be patient visits, could be, again, cardiothoracic surgeries. We have 800 units. And on that, we have charged $90. I guess that won't be cardiothoracic surgeries. Okay, so for $90, let's say it's a diagnostic test. That'd be more in the realm of, I think, what this looks at. So you're having some basic diagnostic blood test. Okay, so 800, we've had 800 tests at $90. That's how much we charged for that test. And so if you multiply that out, you're going to get $72,000 if my math is correct. Okay, so we made that much money. But this diagnostic test, this blood test, requires I don't know, we'll call it a testing strip, okay? And this testing strip, we have an inventory for this. So here's what our inventory looks like. We have, at the beginning of all of this, we're going to have 400 of these testing strips. And they're going to be at, this is my little at symbol, sorry it's hard to read, guys, at $40. And then we're going to have some more inventory rolling on. This is our initial inventory that we have right here is 40. I'll put a little dot right there, little dots. Okay, our initial inventory. Then we got more testing strips have come in. Another 400 have come off the truck. And we'll say those are at $40 also. More testing strips keep coming in. What are you guys doing and ordering? We're getting all these testing strips. Okay, so our next lot of testing strips. Oh no, we've had a price increase. Let's say at $55. And then we've got more inventory coming in. Here's another load of testing strips have come in. That's 40, or I'm sorry, 400. And oh my gosh, the supplier is really ratcheting up the price on us. We're now at $75 for those per unit on those testing strips. Okay, so let's start doing some math. Don't worry, don't panic, don't run for the hills. Simple math. We're just talking about multiplication and division throughout this entire thing. So I think it's pretty easy to do, so don't run for the hills. Okay, so let's see, 40 of these testing strips, or 400 testing strips at $40 each is going to equal $16,000. Okay, so that cost us $16,000. Another batch comes in. All right, that's another $16,000. Trying to write as legibly as possible. And then let's see, we had 100 come in at $55. Dollars, a little price increase, but we didn't get quite as many. So that's, again, if my math is correct, $5,500. And then we got another big order of 400 of these at the larger price now of $75. So that should come out to be about 30,000. Oops. There we go, 30,000. All right, so we got our initial inventory of that, $16,000. Again, I'm going to put a little, I'll make a little dotted line here just to say that's our initial inventory right there. Okay, let's come up with a grand total here. I'll pick a new color, red. Grand total for all of these should come up to be about $67,500 in what we have in all of our inventory expense. Okay, now here comes the tricky part. Remember that we're using FIFO, first in, first out. We have sold 800 units, okay, right up here, 800 units. What we want to calculate now is our ending inventory. How much of these testing strips are left after we've used FIFO and the cost assigned to those testing strips. If you think about it, first in, first out, okay? Well, these were first in right here, these 400. Those would be gone. And then, well, let's see, we got 800, so then another 400 gone. So those two shipments, if you will, would have been gone. So what's left in inventory at that point? What you have is this. So your ending inventory, let's go ahead and run through that. Your ending inventory is going to be 100, times the 55, and then the really expensive strips now are now going up to 75. All right, so you add, you do the multiplication. We've already got the numbers up here, right there, and right there. So you add that up together, and you're going to get, I think we'll stick with our theme here of red, we're going to get $35,000. Oh, sorry, 35. Let me get my eraser here and go back to our pen. $35,500. Okay, so that is the cost of our ending inventory. So what we want to do now is to calculate the cost of our sales. And with that, pretty easy. All we need to do, we know what we've got left, which is this right here. We know how much we spent, so we can figure out our cost. So we do the math on that and our cost of sales. And let's see here, we'll do cost of sales. Is going to be doing some subtraction. Let's see, that should be 32. Stop, sorry guys, I didn't stick to my theme of red colors here. $32,000. Then what would our gross profit be? Our gross profit, if we take how much we made, right up here, how much did it cost? Subtract the two, and we get $40,000. Okay. So we know how much, again, our gross profit is. We know our total of our cost of sales. Now, let's, and this is an important number here, our gross profit. So let me double circle this because this will be good for comparison. All right, so we got that. We'll just that. All right, so we got there is our gross profit. Let's calculate, since we're here, let's go ahead and calculate our cost of sales. That's pretty easy to do. What we're going to do is we're going to divide the $32,000. So we got the 32,000, kind of running out of space, divided by the 72,000. And if we work out the math here, whip out the handy calculator. Double checking here. All right. We should have 0.444, which if you convert that to decimal point or convert that to a percentage is 44%. So 44% is our cost of sales. So you can see how using those inventory numbers, which then we're going to compare then with LIFO. What happens under LIFO, especially when we look at our gross profit? How much are we saying that we claim that we make? Now, before we do LIFO, so we're doing, let's think about it intuitively. So FIFO, first in, first out, we're using smaller numbers typically that we assign right up here. We're typically using smaller numbers that we assign to our inventory because we're in a period of increasing prices, which prices normally do increase over time. So I would intuitively say that FIFO, first in, first out, should give us a better number right down here with our total gross profit. Should look a lot better in this area. All right, let's do our next LIFO example and see what happens. Okay, so here we are back to the dreaded grid, and we are now going to be doing the LIFO example, and we're going to see what happens, especially with our gross profit, what happens in there, and with our cost, our percentage, our cost of sales. So, all right, we've done some of the calculations, so we don't need to do them all over again. Okay, so what we're going to do, we have sales, and if you remember, our sales were at 72,000. That's not going to change. You know, we were charging $90 per test for a diagnostic test, and we had 800 tests. That's not going to change. Our inventory costs, that will not change. The inventory, the cost that we paid for those items, those testing strips that we needed, that part doesn't change. So if you want, you can go back to the other slide and look at that. But again, there's still going to be 400 strips at $40. Then we bought another 400 at $40, and then remember the price increased to $75 at the very end. That part's not going to change. Let me write it down real quick for you. I'm going to pause, write that down, because we will need to reference that structure, though, as we go through this. Okay, I'm back. I've put in that information. Again, that part's not going to change. Now, let's figure out what our ending inventory is going to look like. And this is where we're going to be a little different than before, because now we're using last in, first out. So if you imagine we had sales, and remember our sales were at we had 800 of these, oops, terrible there. We had 800 of these units, okay? So we had gone through, if we remember, last in, first out, we went through all of these. 400. We went through all these, 500. And we went through 300 of these units right here. So we partially went through some of those. So what that leaves us with, we have 400 of the old stale test strips at $40, and we have 100 of that second to last batch also at the same price. If you run the math on that, again, 16,000, we've already got that calculated for us, and 4,000, and that gives us 20,000, ending inventory at $20,000. So our cost of sales is simply taking the total inventory cost that we've calculated here minus our ending inventory cost. That is going to equal, let's see, doing the math here, that's going to equal 47,500. Okay, so this is cost of sales. All right. Now, what we want to calculate then is our gross profit. Gross profit, I'll draw a line right here. We're simply going to subtract these two to come up with our gross profit, and that is 24,500. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at cost of sales as a percentage. So 47,500 over our sales of 72,000. I'm just going to use a K in there for 1,000. That equals 0.66 or 66%. Our cost of sales, the cost of the test strip as a percentage of the sales has increased. So if you look here, let's see if our theory is true. If you look here at our gross profit, and this is gross profit right here, and is it, as we intuitively thought, is it less than what was on the previous slide? And let's just jump back to that slide real quickly here. Okay, so here I've got the FIFO slide and our gross profit right here. This was our gross profit. At 44,000 or at 40,000, and our cost of sales as a percentage was 44. Then let me shrink this out. Okay, and then as we see here, our gross profit is significantly less with under the LIFO system right here, and of course our percentage of cost of sales is much higher as we would intuitively have thought. So again, you can kind of see the difference here. With all my absolute chicken scratches on here, you can see that the FIFO, first in, first out, because we had increasing costs for those test strips versus LIFO, gave us really a big impact on our gross profit. Now, where could that could actually help us in some ways if we don't want to show as much gross profit. And I will we'll move this out of the way here. If we don't want to show that much gross profit on an income statement, that might be a good reason to use a LIFO. And then, FIFO, again, I think that one makes more intuitive sense, and quite frankly, the rest of the world only allows you to use FIFO on accounting statements. So, All right, so here's an example of how LIFO and FIFO really can impact what you would claim as gross profit for your organization. Hopefully this explanation has helped. And as always, thank you for watching.